what is the BPI core thesis? Like, if you're in Washington and you were sat down with a new staffer and it was like a completely open conversation, what's your core thesis of Bitcoin if you had like a minute to explain? What do you say to them?
In much the same way that the internet changed the world and changed how we interact with information, Bitcoin has changed how humanity interacts with value and money. And in the same way that Bitcoin or that the internet enabled a whole host of new businesses and new opportunities, it also came with its own set of like risks and downsides, right? We got Amazon. We also got new forms of scams. We got people living in disconnected, remote parts of the developing world who could like sell their baskets on Alibaba or like eBay. And we got criminal groups that could use it to like undermine infrastructure in countries. Bitcoin is like very similar to that. Our belief is that in the same way that the open flow of information enabled by the internet made the world a better place, the open flow of value enabled by Bitcoin will do the same thing. So that's kind of like our like top shelf framing is like, you know, it's kind of very in the style of like early like Andreas videos, honestly. And again, like a lot of what we do is not groundbreaking or like new thought. It's not that original. I think it's true. So I think relating it to things that people understand, like the internet, explaining that there are benefits and risks, but that the sort of directional trend of freeing up people to transact with each other in the same way that the internet freed them up to communicate with each other will like make the world a better place. Now that's just an argument. People can make arguments against it. I don't expect that to just immediately convince anyone, but that's kind of the way that I like to prime people to think about Bitcoin is like, there are discrete risks. There are discrete opportunities. Nothing's like black and white, but this is revolutionary. It's not going anywhere. It's altering the fabric of society. And let me tell you why I think that, you know, when we weigh the benefits and we weigh the risks, it's a net positive for the world.
And do you attach it to like traditional American values?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of try to, but I'd say, yeah, there's the sort of...
It's a leading question, by the way.
Yeah. Well, there is the argument about like, oh, it aligns with, you know, freedom of choice and all of this stuff. But it also, I think it just more kind of clearly also aligns with like US strategic interests, right? Like our adversaries like China are building competing monetary stacks. They're building walled gardens and they're actively trying to onboard companies and people across the world to their sort of closed walled garden, like dystopian payment architecture. Enter Bitcoin, which presents an effective bulwark to that, right? Like we'd much prefer people living in low and middle income countries to use Bitcoin to connect to global finance than a digital yuan. So, you know, I like to sort of relate Bitcoin to sort of like broad bipartisan, like strategic interests.
So the reason I say it's a leading question is as somebody who's been traveling to America for nearly 20 years now, coming back and forth, absolutely loving it, fascinated by the country, the people, the history. I do kind of feel like over the last few years, kind of traditional American values relating to freedom and privacy have been under attack. I think the Constitution feels like it's been under attack more than ever. It's almost like correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Fourth Amendment relates to unchecked surveillance.
Unreasonable search and seizure.
Yeah.
And like due process.
It almost feels like the Fourth Amendment just doesn't fucking matter anymore. Like no one gives a shit about it. Like I know people do and lawyers do and people, but like the US government is constantly breaking that. And what my worry is like there are parts of America or parts of Washington which is kind of distancing itself from a traditional American values. I wouldn't consider, like if I lived here, I wouldn't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat. I think if anything, I'd be center right. I just feel like there's been this like drag away from it. There was like, Danny was talking about the meme earlier. It's like the new $1.7 trillion infrastructure bill, whatever it was. You know, like, nobody knows where that's going, but tell me where you're spending $600. Like we want to know every payment you're doing everywhere all the fucking time.
Yeah.
Like the lack of privacy, the trajectory towards CBDCs. It's like,
well, there is no constitutional right to privacy.
Oh, there isn't.
Fun fact, the word privacy does not appear in the US Constitution once.
I did not know that.
Yeah, little trivia for you.
Huh.
And I mean, I think sort of that's probably because the founding fathers, like, I mean, I don't know, it's counterfactual, but I assume it's because they thought the Fourth Amendment would cover that.
I mean, how do you define
Oh, another fun fact. The United States Postal Inspection Service predates the Constitution. So we've been reading people's mail since before we even had a constitution, which is interesting.
So how do you define what unreasonable search and seizure is then?
I mean, like sort of the due process, right? Like, so in America, the standard is like, reasonable suspicion or probable cause. Like we have these different sort of thresholds of evidence and we apply them, to different contexts.
For $600, every payment isn't probable cause. It's just mass surveillance.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right that America has deviated post 9/11 from like a lot of these sort of core principles. But, ultimately it's like people are making, trade-offs of values, which is like a common problem, right? You have two things that you believe represent normative goods, and there's some tension like between them. Now, this is sort of way more philosophical, but I'm kind of like a Dworkonian on this. Like I sort of believe there's like a unity of value, but that's sort of for another day. Yeah, in general, I think people are like, hey, we have to balance freedom and security. We have to balance, liberty and equality. So yeah, like I think we've made some really unfortunate choices there. And I think the sort of rapidity with which technology is like dominating our lives and it's all sort of changing like the fundamental nature of like the world in which the Constitution was like written, right? Like the founding fathers could not have anticipated mass communication. They could not have anticipated the amount of information that, you'd be able to glean from people's purchase history, from people's transaction history, from people's search history, their phone calls. And so I think sort of approaching a point, and maybe I think we've already reached it, but
need some more amendments.
Yeah, I think we are certainly at a point where we have to be very deliberate about which sort of principles of liberal democracy we choose to bring with us into the digital age and which we choose to leave behind. Because it is sort of, I think, inarguable that technology is rapidly just changing the realm of what's possible with surveillance, with control. And so the worst thing that you can do is kind of just ignore it and say like, oh, it's all going to be fine. Like we've got the Constitution. It is what it is. Like, no, I think we are at a real danger of losing like fundamental rights, fundamental sort of notions about being free in a liberal democracy if we're not careful. And so that's like also a way that I like to talk about Bitcoin, right? I think it like really does align well with American values, with liberal democratic values. For example, like if you're using Bitcoin, no one can stop you from making a transaction, but you are going to be responsible for the consequences of that transaction. That aligns really nicely with the fundamental liberal principle of, you can't be treated like a criminal by the government until they've proven that you've done something wrong. So yeah, like in some sense, it's kind of like this cypherpunk notion of, well, if our rights aren't going to be respected by law, we can build technology that digitally like enshrines these rights.
The path to updating or changing the Constitution, I can't even foresee the complexities and debates and discussions that would lead to that even happening. I mean, I just don't understand U.S. history or U.S. politics enough.
Arduous process, and it hasn't happened for a while.
Yeah, when was the last time? Do you even know?
I should.
It doesn't matter. Danny will look it up.
Yeah, what was the last constitutional amendment?
It might be the quick. Did you hear?
1992. The 27th Amendment was changed.
Were you born? You probably weren't born, were you?
I was born in 99.
Fuck's sake, man. At least you were born last century.
Yeah. Big flex.
Yeah. God, I was born in the 70s, dude.
It's nuts.
It's fucking 70s.
Yeah.
Just interestingly, just like side point, I just forgot that I read the other day that Microsoft are integrating Chat GBT with their search. And I heard that Google, like they had some kind of thing where they issued like a red warning. I think it's like an internal warning that this is like an existential threat to their business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because like if you can get AI to give you a better answer, I mean, Google like fucking sucks now. It's like 5 ads down the side. Like it doesn't do what it did in the early days where like it just gave you the best result.
Yeah.
It's just like add some bullshit. Like if someone can come out with a search engine that genuinely finds you the best result, people will move quickly. I mean, you probably won't remember. Hold on, the internet predates you, doesn't it?
Well, yeah,
Of course.
totally.
Like, I was like 14. When I was like your age, there was a search engine called Alta Vista. That was the one that everyone used. So first it was Yahoo, but that was more like an index. Then everyone started using Alta Vista. And Alta Vista was great. And then Google came along with their PageRank system, just like destroyed them. It was like, oh, you just use Google, it's better. You just had that experience, that first search, it was great. Bing always sucked because the experience wasn't as good as Google.
Yeah.
But if someone introduces this and it does a better job.
I remember Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves, I remember Ask Jeeves. They had all the ads with the dog.
Yeah.
And there was Lycos.
I don't know that one.
Lycos, yeah, loads of them. The search engine wars. Okay, man. So listen, tell me what you guys are working on now. Like, what is your big pillars of work?
Yeah. So I kind of think a lot of what we did last year was like building up this like big body of research. Like we wrote a lot of like white papers. We wrote a lot of like long form, like sort of research pieces. And this year I see sort of our main goal is like leveraging the bear market to like beat those drums like until we're blue in the face. So like converting, you know, Matt Pines' like 60-page white paper into like one pagers, into like discrete bullet points.
Into tweet threads. We come full circle.
Yeah. But yeah, like I think there's more research that I want to do. There's more research that I want to, or not me do, but there's more research I want to fund that I think would be good. Particularly around like the China stuff. Like I really think one of the compelling arguments in DC for Bitcoin is just how well it aligns with our needs sort of in sort of just like strategic competition with our adversaries. But yeah, a lot of it is distilling the research that we've done over the past year, putting it into like digestible, bite-sized forms, and then just like promoting those ideas. So this conference that we're putting on, Cash App has already they're our first sponsor, which was like amazing. We're going to be like looking for more sponsors for that event. I think PubKey said they would like sponsor the alcohol, which would be awesome.
Are they the New York people?
Yeah. They're like Thomas and them. They're awesome.
Yeah. They show all our games.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
But their bar is awesome. Like if you're ever in New York, you need to go to PubKey.